afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Belize KULCHA Symposium, brought to you by Heritage Education Network Belize. I am your host, Linmara Rosado, and we hope that you enjoyed these morning sessions and are eager to listen to this afternoon's presentations. Although this is our last Culture Day, we would like to remind our viewers that you can find these presentations for this and last year on the Heritage Education Network Belize YouTube page. One of HENB's goals is to provide access to vital information, and we do this through our Culture Symposium. Thank you for supporting heritage and for being stewards of change. Also, don't forget to support HENB by donating on the website at heritagebelize.org or via the link shown throughout the sessions. We have one last segment for you today before we wrap up these amazing 3 days. Continuing with our tribute to Lamanai, our theme for this afternoon is the interface of Lamanai archaeologists and local communities. Lamanai is a sacred and symbolic space, and differences in perspective of this space is the key focus of this afternoon's theme and presentations. We also would like to remind our audience that this Monday is recognized as World Indigenous Resistance Day, and Lamanai, being the longest inhabited site in Belize, also holds ownership as the site with evidence indigenous resistance. And we have been highlighting this throughout our presentations today. Thank you to our virtual audience for being here today. Let's get started with our first presentation for this afternoon. Our first presenter is Miss Karen Pierce. Miss Pierce is an archaeologist and artist with prior experience in interior architectural design. Having studied the Maya in art history courses and by touring Maya sites in Belize in 1998, she learned of an upcoming Maya architecture field school with Dr. David Pendergast and Dr. Liz Graham. After signing up, she fell in love with archaeology, Belize, and Lamanai and the Indian church village. When she returned to Colorado, she took archaeology and anthropology classes and became involved with several community projects in ICV, a craft program, and a high school scholarship program. She received an MA in archaeology in 2016. Opening our afternoon session is Ms. Pierce's presentation titled The Cost of Free: The Rise and Fall of the Indian Church Village Artisans. I give you Miss Karen Price.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be able to talk to you today about the Indian Church Village Craft Training Project and the resulting Artisans Group, people in a project close to my heart. For those who don't know, Indian Church Village is adjacent to the Lamanai site. Because of the Craft Training Project and getting to know people in the village, we also started a village library and a high school scholarship program. In the next presentation, Laura Howard will touch on the development of the library. Then Rutilia Useda and Marvin Ruano will talk about the high school scholarship program. First, some background. In 1998, I attended a Maya architecture field school at Lamanai, taught by Drs. David Pendergast and Liz Graham. I'd taken Maya and Mesoamerican art history courses, but wanted to know how that art was uncovered by archaeologists. That summer, I fell in love with Lamanai, archaeology, and the local people. At the time, I was a studio artist working in metals, primarily copper. Anxious to return to Lamanai in 1999, I assisted Dr. Scott Simmons on the Maya Metallurgy project, investigating copper production. What better way to combine my knowledge of copper working with archaeology? While working with Scott that summer, I started getting to know people in the village. Most of the families had come as refugees from Guatemala and different parts of Central America. The village was small, rural, and remote, with few economic opportunities. Belize buses only served the village 2 days a week when the roads weren't too muddy. It was a 2-hour ride to Orange Walk Town. Village houses were very basic, few had indoor plumbing, and there was no electricity in the village. There still isn't. People didn't have cell phones then. There was one village telephone at someone's house. Certainly no computers in the village. Las Arcadias restaurant was just getting started. There was a primary school, but the teachers didn't always show up. I was saddened to learn how little money the villagers earned for their hard labor, and I wished that I could do something to help them. That summer, Liz Graham, the director of Lamanai, and I started kicking around ideas for craft training for the villagers. I was lucky to have the opportunity to get involved with this when in 2000, Liz Graham was awarded a grant from Canada Fund for Local Initiatives, CFLI. The goal was integrating some of the local villagers with archaeology activities at Lamanai, such as pottery reconstruction, artifact reproductions, and other lab and site museum needs, as well as teaching them about the site and cultural heritage. That summer, a group of archaeologists, artists, and architects working at the Lamanai site, the team, as I shall refer to them, began this endeavor. The CFLI funds allowed us to conduct free craft training sessions for anyone in Indian Church interested in learning some craft skills. These sessions were held weekly in the village community center. There was lots of enthusiasm among the villagers, with around 50 people participating. Simultaneously, the Belize Tourism Development Project, TDP, was just starting at Lamanai, with reconstruction of some of the structures. So there were many archaeologists and team members living in the village from 2000 through 2003. This helped the momentum of the Artisans training project because we were able to maintain regular weekend craft day teaching sessions. Tourists staying at the nearby Lamanai Outpost Lodge loved interacting with villagers. The team helped the emerging artisans sell their crafts to tourists who visited the village. Villagers began to see the possibility of making an income from their craft making. Recently, some of the former scholarship students told me that the income they got from the sale of their pieces helped with their high school expenses. We saw so much potential for the villagers being integrated into Lamanai site activities, where they could benefit financially from increased tourism at the site. And by learning about Lamanai, we encouraged them to be stakeholders of the site. After a year of the weekend craft sessions, we decided to offer a 2-week, adult-only, intensive jewelry making workshop in June 2001, mainly because I was a metalsmith artist and I volunteered to teach it. Supplies were purchased from the CFLI grant. I remember Laura Howard and I going from house to house in the village to tell people about it and explain they would need to pay a $20 Belize fee to help with the supply costs. We had 10 students sign up. Most of them paid $50 Belize to keep their basic jewelry toolkit. After the workshop, the village clinic was used as a jewelry studio. All the equipment from the workshop was kept there, and workshop attendees had access. Let me say here that none of the team members were ever paid for their time on the craft project. It was completely voluntary. We didn't make any money on this. In April 2002, with numerous local villagers enthusiastically embracing the project, Liz Graham, who lived in London, England, applied for funds from the British High Commission in Belize to construct an artisan center building. The funding was awarded soon thereafter. Claude Boulanger and I designed the building, which incorporated FEMA and Belize building standards for hurricane shelters. With additional funds from the government of Belize, I spent months pleading with them, and the donated labor of local villagers and others, a 1,600 square foot artisan center hurricane shelter was constructed under Claude's direction. We all worked together in mixing concrete, pouring foundations, and picking paint colors. In November 2002, we had an opening ceremony for the building. The British High Commissioner cut the ribbon. There was music, dancing, and feasting for all. We got another BHC grant for furniture and completed the interior of the building in early 2003. Soon the artisans were working in their new studios for jewelry making, needleworking, stone carving, and ceramics. With a design motif book that we had created for them, they produced designs referencing Lamanai motifs, Maya art, and local flora and fauna, and sold their pieces in a small gift shop in the building. With the new building, excitement among the many artisans was still high. The jewelry metalworking group of about 10 people took the lead since they were the first to form as a group. The artisans registered as an official community-based organizations. Officers were elected and bylaws were drawn up. We applied for grants for teaching and equipment because there was so much more for the artisans to learn. Little did I know then how complicated and time-consuming the grant process would become. Later in 2003, the ICVA also got their own gift shop at Lamanai. When it first opened, the artisans sold only the crafts they produced. They later started buying things to sell, creating some problems in the group. But business was good, with sales close to 10,000 Belize dollars some months, all of it going directly to the artisans. Tourism at Lamanai steadily increased in the 2000s. Incidentally, in 2015, Lamanai was getting about 60,000 tourists a year. There was such potential for the artisans to make money. After the artisans were settled in their new studios, the real work began. Many of the villagers initially involved in the Artisans project were in a generation of adults who either had no formal education or just a couple of years of primary school. One day, the sewing group asked me to teach them how to make different colors with fabric paint. I was, naively, shocked because this seemed like such basic knowledge, but then it dawned on me that they had never been taught that blue and yellow make green. I also learned some didn't know how to use a ruler, and many had never used a bank. Additional training was definitely needed. The project carried on largely through the help of volunteers and donations. Louise Boulanger applied for a British Executive Services Overseas volunteer to teach crafts for several months. As the Artisan Center was being prepared to open in February 2003, BSO's Sue Lowe arrived to teach crafts. Canadian Mark Pope came then too for a 3-month internship, helping finish up the interior of the building and working with the artisans. We were lucky to have Sue return again in 2004. We also applied for a Peace Corps volunteer to work with the Artisans group, and later in 2003, we got the first of several Peace Corps volunteers. And I became a Peace Corps volunteer supervisor. Unfortunately, the first volunteer didn't work out. With the artisans still in need of skills training, no grant funds on the horizon, and the TDP project winding down in late 2003 with team members leaving, we needed volunteers to teach. I was committed to this project and I continued voluntarily directing it for years. Laura Howard also continued with village projects, and we both spent time in the village every year. As a craftsperson myself, I gave many quick lessons, taught some week-long workshops, and helped with business and marketing. We convinced about 20 artists from abroad to teach a variety of craft workshops. I also continue to apply for funding for craft and business training and to solicit donations for supplies and equipment. We aim to teach things that would help the Indian Church Village artisans run their own local cottage industry, producing quality crafts to market to the numerous tourists who visit Lamanai and Belize each year. We taught the artisans about the Maya, Belize history, and local culture. We took them around Belize to market their products to gift shops. So many things. I was relentless in seeking funding. In January 2003, I participated with the Orange Walk Rotary Club at the project fair in Belize City. We were aiming to get an international club to partner with them for the Artisans project. After making some presentations in my community in Colorado, a partnership was formed and a grant was awarded to the artisans. We also got a grant for the artisans from the Belize Social Investment Fund, Basic Needs Trust Fund. These two grants took a very long time to implement, but they eventually paid for some tools and supplies, a solar power system for the Artisan Center, a computer, miscellaneous office equipment, and for several craft, business, and computer classes. It all sounds great, right? But there was trouble on the horizon. Unfortunately, the grants for the artisans from Rotary and SIF took months, then many years to implement, and the project lost a lot of momentum in the meantime. Although well-intended, the donor agencies' project requirements and inflexible rules were daunting. Time ticked away, excitement faded. Some of the artisans began to lose interest because of a disconnect between their local needs and donor priorities. The artisans were getting lots of stuff for free, but very little training was provided. And the artisans received stuff they didn't know what to do with. And receiving all this free stuff meant they didn't understand its value. The artisans were not equipped with skills to reinvest money, manage accounts, and pay bills. Maintenance was also a problem. They weren't trained to maintain things. One day, Ricardo, the president of the Artisans group, asked me why there was no power from the solar system. No one told them that the batteries for the system had to be kept filled with water. Initially, the artisans marketed their crafts to gift shops throughout Belize, but this was challenging because of the remoteness of the village and the difficulty communicating and traveling. There were no cell phones then. There was also mistrust among the members when it came to handling money and their financial dealings. Teaching results were varied, as some volunteers were too inexperienced to understand and meet the needs of the artisans. Obtaining art supplies locally became a problem. Not surprisingly, there were a couple of exceptional artisans, but poor quality workmanship was a consistent problem for some of the artisans, who seemed unable to understand the importance of quality standards. The artisans group fractured, and individuals competed for ownership of the things they'd been given. Many quit. There was a lack of strong leadership within the group, and members didn't understand each other. Many found it difficult to work as a group. Not everyone agreed to reinvest a portion of their earnings for maintenance and other things. By 2008, the disagreement between the members of the Artisans group was out of hand. I tried to be neutral through all the problems with the artisans, seeking to understand everyone's viewpoint, but I was unable to resolve their conflicts. Today, a couple of artisans make crafts in their homes. The Artisan Center, with its faded paint, is typically locked and no tourists visit. Two people sometimes make jewelry in the Artisan Center, where the 20,000 Belize dollar solar power system sits broken. The lack of electricity is cited as a prime reason that the artisans don't work there. It seems the artisans couldn't find any way to invest in new batteries and repair their solar power system. Incidentally, the Artisan Center is used by the villagers as a hurricane shelter when needed. About 8 of the former artisans still run the gift shop at Lamanai, but almost everything sold in the shop is bought in Belize City and Melchor and resold in the gift shop. People involved in non-governmental organizations, faith-based missions, and volunteer initiatives, myself included, have good intentions, but through this project I've changed my thinking. Now I am more critical of development projects and giving stuff for free. Participants must be invested in the project. Training is vital. Projects have unexpected complexities. How do we help without creating dependency? We need to find a better balance. Thanks for attending, and thank you to a multitude of people who helped with the project.
Thank you, Miss Pierce. Another reminder to our audience, please post your questions in the comment section and we will address them during the question and answer session. Don't feel that you need to wait until the question and answer session to ask your questions. Next up, we have Miss Laura Howard, who holds a Master of Science degree in anthropology from Florida State University. Her first trip to Belize was an excavation project in Pull Trouser Swamp through FSU in 1995. After that, she worked for 5 years at the Lamanai Field Research Center and then started her own travel company in 2001. She has been involved in various projects in the area surrounding the archaeological site of Lamanai. Over the years, she has focused her efforts on exposing the traveling public to this area and collaborating with the residents of Indian Church and San Carlos Village on various projects, including 2 libraries, a large restaurant kitchen, and the design of a dock with a fill foundation. Her interest in archaeology is what took her to Belize, but her interest now lies with its people, the friends she has made that are like family. Dr. Howard's presentation focuses on two communities near Lamanai, Belize, Indian Church and San Carlos. Let's tune in.
First off, I would like to tell you how excited I am to be here today to present this work. And second, I would like to say thank you so much to Heritage Education Network Belize for all of their hard work and dedication to this symposium, as well as the other work that you do. It is very important and it's so appreciated. And I also want to thank you for your patience and support during this process. My name is Laura Howard, and I came to Belize as an archaeologist for the first time in 1994 and worked at an archaeological site called Pull Trouser Swamp. It was after that that I was hired by the Lamanai Field Research Center, which is housed at the Lamanai Outpost Lodge, and worked for the next 5 years. It was at that time that I met Dr. Elizabeth Graham, and she and I began to develop archaeological field schools that we did through the Lamanai Archaeological Project. We also worked with Dr. Scott Simmons on field schools as well. I was fortunate at that time also to meet Karen Pierce, who presented earlier in this session. The project that I'm going to present on today is called Philanthropy Through Travel, two communities near Lamanai, Belize, Indian Church and San Carlos. The session that it fits into is the interface of Lamanai archaeologists and local communities. I know many of you do know the location of the country of Belize, but I went ahead and put it here anyway. And then I do have a map in the center here of the country of Belize. And I have a red circle here around the area where Indian Church, San Carlos, and the Lamanai Archaeological Site are located, which is considered northern Belize, and it's in the Orange Walk District. The map on the right here is showing these locations a little bit closer up, and you can see here on the north end is Lamanai Archaeological Reserve. This is a 2 square mile reserve, and then you can see Indian Church, which is directly to the south of the reserve. This map does show it. It appears it's on the river, but it's not. It's set back from the river. It's actually on the juncture of the road right here. And then approximately 3 miles south is the community of San Carlos that you see here. And one of the interesting facts about Lamanai is we do know that it's a popular tourist destination, but the Belize Tourist Board does list that we had over 80,000 visitors to this area in 2018. And also, as many of you know, the World Monuments Fund did put Lamanai on their watch list for 2022. And one of the things that the World Monuments Fund says about areas that they put on these lists, especially for Lamanai, is that sustainable tourism strategies are needed to recalibrate the impact of tourism and ensure just outcome for local communities. So this is extremely important to us, and we do look forward to what that might bring for us. I started the company of Beyond Touring, which developed out of the community engagement work that we did on the Lamanai Archaeological Project, as well as my keen interest in sharing and exposing the traveling public and student groups to the area surrounding Lamanai, including the 2 communities of San Carlos and Indian Church. The idea was to generate funds from the traveling public, and then each group had a community engagement component or a hands-on service learning project. Prior to travel, we would reach out to leaders of the community, principals of the schools, and or head of the women's co-op, or the village councils, depending, or all, again, depending on what the need was, to inquire about what they thought that they wanted or needed for their community. All highlighted projects presented here stem from those meetings and town halls. And our goal was always impact-driven projects with a positive end result through responsible service travel that was inclusive in nature. The first highlighted project is the Indian Church Library. In 2003 is when the community had expressed a desire to have a library. So it was in 2003 that we started with a consultation with the village council and residents and began planning. And then in 2004 was when we started fundraising. Also in 2004 was when we did the remodel and the upgrade of the existing government building, which I'll show on the next slide. And then in 2005, we started our partnership with the Belize National Library System. It was in 2003 that we began to make this project a reality. And what we did was, there was an existing small building that was allocated for a Peace Corps worker. And the Department of Education was who actually owned it. So we did meet with them, and they provided us with the paperwork, and the building was given to Village Council of Indian Church. You can see that building is this little building that's right here. And that's what we call phase 1 of this project. And this phase 1 was completely funded by a family who had traveled with Beyond Touring and provided the initial $5,000 for this project. The second phase of work, which you can see the crew here putting these on the blocks, and then you can see it on this back section here is the new part of it. That was the second phase, and that was predominantly provided monies from individuals, especially Lamanai archaeologists and their friends and family. This individual here in the middle is particularly important. Her name is Sonia Gonzalez, and she is a part-time librarian working at the library year-round, and is salary is paid by the Belize National Library. And Sonia is an incredible librarian who does magnificent projects, and this is one of them that she does every summer. She does hold a summer camp, summer reading camp to promote literacy. And you can see the students here with their t-shirts and their poster boards that they made. So we're very excited to have Sonia on this project for so many years and appreciate all of her hard work. Our second highlighted project is the San Carlos Library. The funding of this library was primarily from student groups who traveled with Beyond Touring, but also from Lamanai archaeologists and their family and friends as well. So in 2011 it was when we met with the village council, and they expressed an interest in having a library. So it was that same year that we also began fundraising. And then in 2012, we did start the remodel and the upgrade of one classroom in the previous, our old school that was in the community. And 2012 was also the time that we began our partnership with the Belize National Library System. The San Carlos Library is significantly bigger than the Indian Church Library, but it does have a few less books. From our partnership with Food for the Poor, we were able to get books to Belize with them. They placed our boxes in their shipping containers that were coming to Belize. Food for the Poor is located in my hometown, Deerfield Beach, Florida. So I would box up the books and take them over in a rented van. We also worked and partnered with the Belize National Library, who would pick up the books from the port, take them to the library, National Library in Belize City, catalog every book, and then we worked closely with the Mennonite Penner family, who would pick up the books from the Belize National Library and bring them out to San Carlos and Indian Church. This library too, this library, San Carlos, benefited from the Belize National Library partnership because there is a permanent part-time position for a librarian there as well. So you can see here in these images, this is a student group that traveled through Beyond Touring that is presenting to the students in the library. You can see them here as well. This is outside of the library. This right here is the classroom that we refurbished. So this one we had to do a little bit more than we did to the original building at Indian Church, because we did have to redo all of the windows. We did have to do the complete roof, all the doors, and then we did do the Celtex on the ceiling part inside. But this is, like I had mentioned earlier, is significantly bigger space. And you can see a student here working with some of the Belizeans as well. And then, of course, we did have a service learning where we did paint the outside with this group. The third highlighted project is the kitchen construction at Las Orquídeas restaurant in Indian Church. The restaurant began as a woman's group. They were predominantly grinding corn into masa for the community to purchase and use, and that's what the restaurant grew out of. In 1995, they did receive a grant from Canada Fund for Local Initiatives, which started that part of the process. And it was in 2011 that the organization came to us and said that they were interested in a larger kitchen, and also the fact that they were still using wood in the interior part of their original kitchen, which can be a health hazard. So in 2011, we met with the group. We talked about fundraising, and it was at that time that Project Kitchen Belize initiative began. And then in 2012, the addition to the rear replaces the previous kitchen, including the plumbing, sink, and the cupboards. We all felt that this was such a worthwhile project because the ladies that work at Las Arcadias work incredibly hard. It is amazing how many families in the community this co-op benefits, and their work ethic is really unmatched in any organization in the area. They do have a rotating work schedule, and so that helps them. So they're on and off certain times. Um, I'm going to look through the pictures here a bit and just show you. This is the on this left side here. This is the original kitchen, part of the original kitchen, but it gives you an idea of what they did have, and then you can see here the new construction. And this, of course, is the building of it. This is the original structure here, and then this is the addition that was put on. This addition was predominantly funded by the group that you see here. This group visited, and during that time they did hold numerous meetings with the ladies and talk to them about what they thought about expanding their kitchen, and they were very amenable and positive to this, and had asked for this. And I mentioned earlier that this older kitchen here, they were still burning wood inside of it, which is a serious health hazard. So one of the things that was built was this stove that does have a chimney to vet out the smoke. But predominantly this stove right now is used only for traditional cooking lessons that they give. So people that visit the area can learn how to do empanadas and grind the corn and learn how to do handmade from ground corn tortillas. And then you can see an individual, one of the ladies here working in the new kitchen. So this, as I mentioned, this is the group that did the predominant fundraising for it. This individual right here in the yellow shirt is Jessie Marcotte, and she did a lot of the organizing and held a fundraiser in an art gallery in Long Beach, California that raised $8,000 to do this addition for the ladies. You can see this picture here of the original group of Las Orquídeas, and this is a more one of the most current pictures that I have of the group. And our fourth and final project highlighted is the dock at San Carlos. In 2014, we did have a student group that came and held a town hall with the community and helped them assess needs that they may have and wants. And what came out of it was the dock. And then 2015, we began the land and jetty construction. And also in 2015, the floating dock was constructed at that point. So you will see here, this is the student group from Florida International University that came and conducted the town hall. These students, once they heard from the community what their need was, went back to Miami and did hold a fundraiser to support this project. The design is a bit different because it does have this jetty land that we put in and priced in because this area is marsh. Especially during the low season. And then we designed, while the Mennonites assisted us, we designed a floating dock for the end that you see right here. And you can see a little bit of it right here as well. But unfortunately, that portion of the dock is no longer there because it was taken out by a tropical storm. But the jetty is still used, this landmass jetty is still used, especially during the low season. This is where my presentation ends. We had many trials and tribulations during these highlighted activities and other projects, and our overriding lesson was at every juncture to include the residents. And and ensure that their needs were met, and to ensure that everybody was included in what we did. I'd like to thank you for being here today, and I would like to thank again the Heritage Education Network for all their work on this symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. So far, we've had two presentations involving the community, but our next presentation will be about hearing from community members directly. Our next presenters are Mr. Marvin Ruano and Ms. Rutilia Useda. Mr. Ruano always dreamed of getting a good education because, unlike his father, he had no interest in farming. He now teaches conversational and business English in Taiwan while pursuing a PhD in business management. His research focuses on tourist decision making within the Belize tourism industry. Miss Rutilia Useda was deserted by her parents at age 12, but she managed to finish high school with the help of the scholarship program, which eventually led her to Galen University, where she studied primary education. She has taught primary school in the Belmopan area for 14 years and is presently enrolled in a master's program in school counseling at Campbellsville University in Kentucky. Rutilia is also a soccer referee in Belize. They will be sharing together their presentation entitled From Barefoot Primary School Students to University: How a Scholarship to High School Changed the Course of Our Lives. I give you Mr. Marvin Ruano and Miss Rutilia Useda.
Hello, everybody. I'm Marvin Ruano in Taiwan.
Hi, everyone. This is Rutilia Useda from Belmopan, Belize.
And today we're going to tell you a little background on the Indian Church Village Scholarship Program and how it changed our lives.
By 2001, Karen Pierce had gotten to know a lot of people in the village. She knew many children wanted to go to high school, but their families could simply not afford it. The cost to attend high school was about $3,500 per year. An Indian church was too far away for the students to commute daily, so they have to live closer to their schools. In 2002, Karen and some of the parents started talking about how to help the children attend high school, but all ideas involved money.
That same year, Karen met Les Frayne from SHARE, a Canadian nonprofit organization, which was already providing scholarship for students in the rural villages in Belize. So Karen just asked Les and SHARE if they could provide scholarships for the Indian Church Village students. So in 2003, SHARE agreed to provide 6 students from Indian Church Village, including Rutilia and myself, a scholarship for $600 Belize dollars. And that was the catalyst needed to officially start the scholarship program and invite other donors to contribute as well.
The SHARE money helped, but the students still needed money to pay for books, uniform, transportation, food, and housing. Karen raised additional money from numerous private donors, and the scholarship program was officially started. Potential students had to submit a scholarship application and agree to follow the scholarship rules.
Initially, students were given monthly allowances for their expenses, extra expenses, but then the following year, more money was raised, and also more students joined the scholarship program. Therefore, later the next year, or the following year, no more monthly allowances were given to the students. Instead, the scholarship program opted for a loan program whereby students were loaned books and laptops, which they had to return at the end of the semester for the new students to use. Then Karen and other people realized that it was really important for the parents to also contribute both financially and with the rules. So it was a learning process through experience, and then the scholarship program was adjusted and some changes were made.
Karen feels that the students in the first years were very serious about getting an education. Those first 6 students all graduated from high school and continued with higher education. It seems as time passed by, there were students who didn't care as much about school, and many dropped out mid-year. This became a challenge with funding, and by 2015, donations were primarily used by the school books. By 2020, SHARE stopped providing scholarships and the scholarship program had fizzled out. Throughout the years, many students were helped by the scholarship program and successfully graduated from high school. Well, for me, although my parents had a job, it was still not enough to provide all that was needed to send me to high school. Primarily because they didn't believe that education was that important. However, I was motivated, I should say, by my primary school teachers. They were the engine behind me. I come from a very critical environment where abuse was at its best. So to get away of the toxic environment, school was my only means of getting away. So at primary school, my teachers were my role models. They believe in me, they push me to do my best. And well, when the opportunity came to apply for the scholarship, I was excited. I was not told that I get it, but as long as I put in the application, I felt a relief that I would get it. Thank God for that. So I started high school. And high school was the best. Was the best despite of many factors. At the beginning, when I started high school, I went through family trauma that maybe I am still in recovery process. But when I started school, my mother left without giving me any notice, without seeing me, and processing that at that time was very challenging and difficult for me. And although I like many things about high school, the food, sports, and friends, it would get hectic at times. I had to get myself a summer job so that I can help to buy my school supplies and all that I needed for high school. So, but it was good knowing that I was working for my money, and it felt so good, that I believe that if I didn't had the goal of finishing school, maybe I would drop out because I had a job, but I knew what I wanted then. And definitely it was not working at that time, but to continue school. So one of the greatest lessons I learned at 13 is that family is not only about DNA, but rather people that want to see you succeed in life, people that are there giving you moral support. And for this, I thank Lara Howard. She was one of my personal mentors, who was always behind on that phone through emails, text messages, pushing me, encouraging me, scolding me at times, but it was all needed for me to keep focus, and that was excellent. I appreciate it. So one of the challenges at high school was processing my mother leaving, and that was the most painful and difficult time while going through high school. And keeping focus and being positive about life at 13, it was very challenging. But in 2007, I managed to finish high school. And in 2009, I managed to finish junior college. Not an easy job. I had to sell battles, literally sell battles to get money to ride the bus back home. Then when I finished, I came to Belmopan. I started teaching here in Belmopan. Then at night, I started my bachelor degree at Galen University, which I managed to complete in 2016. I am now the result of the lessons learned through my life, and life keeps being my best teacher. Today, I'm a teacher with 10 years of experience, caring as much as possible for my students' social and emotional well-being, as well as academics. I am now aiming to become a school counselor and impact the life of students by guiding them to be successful citizens for our country, to be resilient, and to overcome life challenges because hard work and dedication pays off. I am grateful for the opportunity of having this scholarship. It has indeed been a wonderful experience meeting new people. Um, Apart from being a teacher, I am a football referee who has also traveled different part of Central America through that profession. But now I skip to teaching. I do officiating, and hopefully soon I'll be a counselor.
Thank you, Rutilia, for such an inspiring story. I'm sure you are an inspiration not only to me, I'm so proud of you, but to many children in Belize and also, especially in Indian Church Village. As for me, coming from a similar background as Rutilia, living in Indian Church Village, although my parents had, different jobs at the local resort, which is the Lamanai Outpost Lodge, they still had to make extra money because they had to put my brothers and sister through high school as well before me. So I must say that the scholarship program was a tremendous help for my family and of course for me to get me through high school. I wanted to go to high school because I didn't want to work under the heat or under the hot sun in Belize like my dad, doing labor work. So I love to study, I would stay indoors and study. And I promised to myself that I would go to every university in the world if possible, but not work in the fields with my dad. High school taught us many lessons. And one of them was, one of the challenges for me was waking up early because I'm not a morning person. So I had to catch the bus on Monday. Monday was like a long day for us. We had to wake up at 5 a.m. and then get to class by 8 o'clock. So sometimes I still have nightmares of missing the bus. And I still remember my mom, if she wanted to go into town with us, she had to get ready, prepare some food for my dad or do a lot of house chores before the bus would come at 5 a.m. Sometimes she would tell the bus driver to go around the village twice so she could be ready. And the bus driver would come back. She was still not ready because she's just preparing so many things. Walking into the bus, getting ready and trying to make it to town on time. For me, the best part of the scholarship program in high school was just working together as a team, with Rutilia and the other 6 students. It was just all about camaraderie and just doing everything together. planning activities, doing our community service together, deciding which place of the village we would clean or what we would do, competing to see who was going to be the fastest or the best. Also, putting on shows, acting Cinderella or singing and dancing, just school performances, and just working together as a team. That was the best. And the biggest lesson was learning how to be appreciative and, grateful and hardworking. So we learn how to write, thank you notes and say thank you to our donors and just appreciation. And we also had to do many other things. We had to go to the craft center and do some ceramics or make some jewelry, which we would sell and use the money to cover extra expenses as well. So in high school, I remember there was a class called self-development, and it just taught us, to be academically prepared, but not only academically prepared, but also, I went to a Catholic high school. It's called Bishop Martin High School. So how to be also spiritually developed and globally aware leaders, and also socially responsible citizens. So that's what has molded me into who I am today, or who I tried to be. And now I have come here to Taiwan as an international student, traveled the world, mostly Southeast Asia, visited many different countries, met people from all over the world, different backgrounds, learned a different culture, different language. And it was all because of the scholarship program. So that allowed us to, go out and explore and become the people we are today. So thank you so much to everyone who has helped us in any way possible. And we're open, Rutilia and I were here to inspire and motivate and help any other children that want to follow our footsteps. We're here to help you. We want to contribute back to Belize and to Indian Church Village as well. Thank you so much.
That's right, Marvin. Well said.
Thank you, Mr. Ruano and Miss Useda, for that moving and inspiring presentation. Next up, I am excited to present one of our co-founders and co-directors at Heritage Education Network Belize, Miss Ella Békési. Miss Ella Békési is both co-founder and co-director at Heritage Education Network Belize, and she was born and raised in Budapest, Hungary. She received her BA in archaeology and MA in cultural heritage at University College London. She worked as an assistant in public and commercial archaeology, as well as in the heritage sectors in the United Kingdom, Iraq, and Belize since 2014. She participated in the Lamanai archaeology project and later conducted ethnographic research that looked at the relationship between Lamanai Archaeological Reserve and the nearby Indian Church Village. Her research formed the foundation for HENB's recent nomination of Lamanai Archaeological Reserve and its broader cultural landscape to the World Monuments Fund 2022 Watch. Today's presentation, titled Indian Church Village and Lamanai Archaeological Reserve, Identity, Placemaking, and the Role of Heritage Tourism, is a glimpse into her research and HENB's Watch nomination project. I give to you our co-founder and co-director, Miss Ella Békési.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ella Békési. I am a co-founder and co-director at Heritage Education Network Belize. And many of you may not know, but I also worked at Lamanai Archaeological Reserve and at the nearby Indian Church Village for many years. And I'm currently one of the leads on our World Monuments Fund 2022 watch nomination of Lamanai Archaeological Reserve and its broader cultural landscape. So in 2017, I did ethnographic research at Indian Church Village, looking at the relationship between Lamanai and the local residents. Although I have spent a lot of time in the village before, and since then, it was very interesting and eye-opening to converse with the people and listen to their stories. Now, while there are many angles I could take, there are three key topics I'd like to focus on today, and these are identity, placemaking, and the role of heritage tourism. Now, the importance of these angles is to help us understand what are some of the ongoing socioeconomic, tourism, and heritage challenges, and what methods are best to tackle these in the case of Lamanai. Similar challenges are actually present at many heritage sites across the globe. It is part of our discipline. And so I look at this study as an opportunity for continuous learning and improvement. And before we get into it, I wanted to share some background information about Lamanai and Indian Church Village. I will be brief since Lamanai is the topic of an entire session at the KULCHA Symposium. Many of you already know a great deal. So Lamanai and Archaeological Reserve is located in the Orange Walk district along the New River Lagoon. Lamanai and the larger archaeological area includes Lamanai Reserve itself, Kaka Beach, which is 10 kilometers to the west from Lamanai, and other sites such as KULCHA, for example. Now, the Lamanai cultural area, on the other hand, is much bigger and more ambiguous, if I can say that. It includes various villages like San Carlos, San Felipe that are close to Lamanai, Mennonite camps and communities such as Shipyard or Blue Creek. And one can argue about other villages being part of the cultural area like August Pine Ridge, Yo Creek, all the way to Orange Walk Town, essentially. And then there is Indian Church Village, which is located a mile south of the core of Lamanai Archaeological Reserve, sharing a border with the reserve currently. And it used to be located inside what we call Lamanai Archaeological Reserve today, near to 16th century Spanish colonial churches, roughly where you see the red circle on the map. And the village was moved in 1990 to make space for conservation, park development, and to accommodate growing tourism. Now, in addition to the traditional, quote unquote, traditional Maya history at the site that we often see highlighted, Lamanai also has an interesting colonial history that is partly shown by the two 16th century Spanish Franciscan churches close to the location of Old Indian Church Village, like I showed you in the previous slide. Now, these churches can tell the story of Maya resistance in the area during the early colonial periods in Belize, for example. And you can also see a beautiful illustration by Louise Bélanger on the right about how one of the churches looked like. Now, then we can talk about the 19th century British sugar mill on site, which tells the story of Chinese or East Indian indentured laborers being brought to Belize, as well as the history of the sugar industry in Orange Walk, which is one of the main industries till this day. I am being brief here with the history because of time, but as you can see, while the most popular tourism attractions usually include the Maya site core at Lamanai, it actually represents much more in terms of what Belize and Belizean society is today. So I conducted an ethnographic research between May and August in 2017 in Indian Church Village and Lamanai Archaeological Reserve. And while it has been 5 years, I do feel that the results are still really relevant, especially in light of the 2022 World Monuments Watch nomination. So I want to mention some of my research methods that I followed. I primarily adopted a so-called qualitative approach. I used semi-structured, open-ended interview questions and observational methods. I conducted one-on-one interviews between June and July in 2017, and I also asked the residents to fill out a short questionnaire in addition. I randomly selected 37 residents, ages 18 or above. All interviews were anonymous, and each participant was given a code which they are referred by. And interviews were conducted in English or Spanish, depending on what the individual wanted. And I interviewed approximately 16.6% of the interview eligible population of Indian Church, meaning 18 years or above. And I was looking to understand village history and relationships within the village and Lamanai as well. And I also wanted to understand tourism behavior in the village. So how many and what kind of tourists visit the area? Overnight, school trips, cruise tourism, etc. How often do residents visit? Do they visit differently from other tourists? How do they cope with rules and regulations that heritage sites usually have? And finally, how do these factors impact the safeguarding of culture, economic development, and well-being at Indian Church Village? So my observational work included Lamanai Outpost Lodge and the site of Lamanai itself, restaurants at Indian Church Village, 2 guest houses, souvenir shops at the site of Lamanai itself, and of course, Indian Church Village as a whole. The main themes focused on, like I mentioned, place identity, placemaking, which includes representation and local narratives, and tourism involvement. And I want to say here that if there are people from Indian Church Village listening, I hope I do you justice with what I will talk about. And firstly, I want to talk a little bit about identity and placemaking. 2 things to highlight here. The majority of the people in Indian Church Village have ties with Guatemala or El Salvador, but many people were already born in Indian Church, either on the old village or in the new village, and I mean literally on site, because that is where the old village was. And also, when I asked about descendencia, heritage, patrimonio, out of 25 people who answered, 24 highlighted to have some level of Maya descent. So though the connection to Lamanai, what I noticed is actually only partly came from shared Maya identity and mainly from being Belizean citizens. People take on a more shared global heritage approach, and when asked questions like whose heritage is Lamanai, who should it belong to, who treasures it the most, people overwhelmingly said that Lamanai belongs to everybody, or it belongs to Belizeans and the country of Belize. So that's an interesting approach. I also want to talk about childhood memories. They're very important. I heard many stories, and people showed me, trees their grandparents planted, for example. And I want to read these 2 quotes because I feel they represent how people in Indian Church Village look at Lamanai and how this connection is shared through generations. So the first one is, because when I was a little girl, I used to go because, we lived there and we used to have a little dock where my mom, she used to go to wash, and she was washing and we were swimming. But it was when we were kids, and I love it. I swim, but I can't swim a lot now. And then there's also a younger resident who said, because I know a lot of stories that my mom told me because they used to live there before, and it sounds just good, and I feel like it's part of me. So overall, people from Indian Church Village look at the site of Lamanai as a social space first, and as a tourist attraction second. People call the site home, and it actually represents their identity as Belizeans, their connection to Belize, and to the Indian church community. And people use the site differently as well. They tell stories, they have picnics, and would want to visit the places where their parents or grandparents lived, see those trees that their grandparents planted. So it's a very different kind of approach to the site that you would normally see. Now, how can we, what we need to think about is how can we accommodate these non-touristy visits? Essentially, how can we represent the stories of the people, and not just Indian Church Village residents, but the residents of surrounding villages, Maya communities in surrounding villages, some of whom have actually presented at KULCHA this week, And then going into tourism involvement, I want to talk a little bit more about that. I looked at the 2019 pre-COVID data. I didn't want to use 2020 statistics because it would give COVID numbers, and I think that the 2021 statistics are not available yet, or at least I couldn't find them. However, what is interesting when we look at the 2019 stats is, one, over 89.8% of visitors at Lamanai were international tourists. And out of 74,444 visits, only 4,665 were Belizean residents in total. Now, we don't know how much of this are Indian Church residents or people from local villages. Two, Indian Church Village saw possibly less than 100 visitors in 2019. We would have to check field school and research visits and the visitation of Lamanai Outpost Lodge specifically, but it is relatively isolated from the village anyway. So I do know that during and after COVID, this tendency somewhat shifted and more Belizean residents visit sites now. We will have to see the statistics about that. Still, what we can see in this case is an extreme case of unbalanced tourism, a level of over-tourism at Lamanai that negatively impacts conservation, and low tourism at Indian Church that also negatively impacts the economy of the village and the surrounding villages. So Indian Church is actually not often included in guided tours or in tourism publications, and many tourists enter Lamanai via the lagoon, avoiding the village. That was one of the main issues that was highlighted. Interestingly, still, when I asked, 91.9% of people stated that Lamanai has either a smaller or larger economic impact on Indian Church Village, and they primarily mentioned tourism, tourism-related jobs, and archaeological projects. And 73% would want to be more involved with what is happening at Lamanai still, even though there is some economic impact that people are already seeing. So coming to an end, I just wanted to highlight some ideas. How can we use this information? We can look at planning community engagement projects and enabling mutual learning opportunities to learn from each other. We can, we can look into changing museum exhibits or tours to include local narratives and local sites. We can look at analyzing involvement in tourism and going on that path. We can also look at potentially enabling new ways of information sharing, allowing people to tell their stories and making those stories public if people wish to, making those stories accessible. We can look at capacity building trainings as well. And it is important to see, in my opinion, how the case of Lamanai and Indian Church Village can be used to approach similar challenges, not just in the district and not just in Belize, but worldwide as well. I hope I've said something new, and thank you for your time, and hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you for that presentation, Ella. I now invite our presenters, all of our presenters this afternoon, to come onto our panel for the question and answer segment. And remember, viewers, you can drop your questions into the comment section of the live stream on Facebook or YouTube, and we will address your questions during this question and answer segment. So I invite Ms. Ella Békési, Mr. Marvin Ruano, Ms. Rutilia Useda, Dr. Laura Howard, and Ms. Karen Pierce. All right, so we've had so much support for your presentations this afternoon. And I think if you're following in the comment section, you will see that. And viewers, we absolutely appreciate your support. We have had so many good presentations this afternoon, so many moving and inspiring presentations, and so much good work that is happening on the ground. So we'll start with questions for our first presenter, Ms. Pierce. Are there avenues through which donating institutions can better understand the communities they want to support? Or is a grassroots aid system more useful?
Well, I think it's probably a combination of both things. Um, the one thing I would say about donating institutions, which is probably fairly impossible to have actually happen, is that living in the village gives you the best insight you can get. And I spent a lot of time there when I was doing this, and I was living in people's houses in the village. So I felt like I had closer to an insider perspective, although I would never understand everything. So having people spend time there, get to know everyone, that's very helpful, but probably quite impractical among donating institutions. So the next best thing is to find people who are working on the projects who can convey the feelings of the villagers and needs of the villagers to the institutions. But sometimes the regulations that they have in place make that difficult. And so the grassroots system was great, and we were able to do a lot without restrictions. And it turned out a combination of both things here really pushed the project forward.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce, for that response. Our next question is for Dr. Howard. As someone who got to see these projects firsthand, do you believe that any of the projects were done of better quality than the others? And how so? Also, what would be some recommendations to increase the quality of life and development of the village in the future? It's quite a number of questions in there, but I'm sure you'll be able to address them.
Well,
Dr.
thank
Howard.
you. I do want to let you know I do not have a doctorate. I'm very flattered that you, but yeah, I have a master's, not a doctorate. But and one of the things I did want to say before I start is that one of this session that we're working on, one of the things that's really important that wasn't evident in my presentation is the fact that the Artisans project that Karen was is such a big part of. These projects, at least mine, Rutilia and Marvin's, spawned out of basically her initial work, because once that work started in the community, there were other things were asked, which included the libraries. So that those two projects did come out of that involvement in that. But yeah, we all worked as a team, as she mentioned. I So to address the question, I guess I mean one example would be funding, because if you sorry, if you have um, more funding, then you're going to have a higher quality of a project. So the kitchen project at Las Orquídeas Women's Group, that was, we did have quite a bit more funding for that. So that assisted. And for instance, the dock that we did in San Carlos, we didn't really have that much money for that project. So we did have to, when we had the designer, a Mennonite doing it, we did have to say, look, this is all the money we have. What kind of dock, would we be able to do with that? So there is a difference in the quality of those, and it usually stems from funding. The next part of that, I think that's important to note here. It says increase the quality of life and the development of the community. I just, one of the things that a Heritage Education Network does is to put forth all of these kind of ideas. But I think it's very important to realize that I've taken hundreds of people to that community, and the quality, how do we define quality of life? Is relative to your culture and where you grow up, because I had so many people travel with me and tell me that it was one of the most rewarding experiences um, to encounter, how they lived and how little they had, and how happy they seemed, more than some of the individuals, from the United States, for instance, seemingly, having less, but the quality of their life, in terms of happiness, was much higher than a lot of Americans. But I would recommend, and I think this talks to some points that were brought up earlier today too. I think tourist involvement is very important, because I think the traveling public is a wealth of information, a wealth of funding. And I think we miss the boat on that a lot. And that's one of the things that was one of my goals, was to fund these projects through tourism. And I think we should stay down that road. People come to those areas and experience amazing things, and they want to help. And I do think it does need to be done under the direction of the community. So community led, and as much as possible, all the time, community input for projects.
Thank you for that insight, Ms. Howard. Our next question is for Ms. Useda. Are the scholarships offered to students based on good grades? And here, I think we're asking about the scholarships that you received and perhaps Mr. Ruano received. The question is, are the scholarships offered based on good grades, or is it open to any child that wants to attend?
Let me jump in here because I may be able to answer that better than Rutilia.
Okay.
The scholarships were, in theory, based on grades, your motivation to go to high school. But in reality, it was pretty much everyone who wanted a scholarship got help, because it was very hard to assess, to use grades to assess whether someone was deserving of going to high school. And because we had the funding to be able to send a number of kids to school, we pretty much didn't use grades. Now, if someone was completely like failing, they probably wouldn't have even been in a position to apply, but that probably would have weighed in somewhat, but it wasn't grades. It was more, we wanted every child who wanted to go to high school to be able to go to high school.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce, for that.
Oh, may I say one more thing? Marvin isn't in this session because, as we noted earlier, he's in Taiwan and it's like 4 a.m. there, so he couldn't be in the session, the Q&A.
Right. Thank you. Our next question is for Ms. Rutilia, and this one is about personal experience. What would be your advice to students who are in a similar situation like yours when you were growing up? Miss Useda, can you hear us? Oh, we seem to have some challenges with audio. We can't hear you, Miss Useda.
Rutilia, there's a button that says mute at the bottom of your screen. Does it have an X in it right now?
Perhaps we can move on to another question while you sort that out. No, we still can't hear you. I'm sorry, Miss Useda. This question is once again for Ms. Pierce. How do you think the artisans from the village could have been better supported so as to avoid the workshop unfortunately closing down, not necessarily financially?
Education. That was so vital and oftentimes so overlooked by the donating agencies. People wanted to give things, but there was so much to teach. And I hope that in my presentation that came across that, first of all, the people weren't by nature artisans, and some of them were able to, they had a natural ability to be artisans, but in addition to learning the craft, they had so many fundamental things to learn, especially because the adults in the village, as I mentioned, a lot of them hadn't received much formal education. So just many, many basic things that are involved in producing and running a business and selling all had to be learned. And I think we needed to spend much more time on that. I tried as hard as I could to get people to teach that. I worked with them a lot. We had other volunteers who helped with that, but it pretty much needed to be a non-stop teaching thing for years. So that was the biggest thing I have to say. Teaching, they needed that more than anything, and everybody was so willing to learn. It was just unfortunate we couldn't keep it up full time.
So it definitely speaks to the greater needs outside of just financial assistance.
Yes.
Certainly. Our next question is directed to any of our presenters. In what ways have you guys, as the creators or leaders, benefited by helping in the Indian church community? You guys just do it out of the goodness of your heart to help others. And I think we'd like to hear from Ms. Békési and Ms. Pierce and Ms. Howard. I think we'd like to hear from all three of you here.
I want to say that it's out of the goodness of our heart. It definitely is. It definitely is. But in a way, I think working at Indian church and meeting the people there, making friendships, is an amazing thing. And also in my case, it really was the spark that led me and my friends to found this organization. So I wouldn't dare to say that I didn't get anything out of it. I didn't get anything monetary out of it ever. But I got a lot of great friendships out of it. I got a lot of amazing experiences out of it. And I got to have this organization because some of the issues that and challenges that we experienced, that I experienced in Indian church, and what I talked to the people about was the core, at least for me, for founding this organization and trying to make a change, not just at Indian church, but also in Belize and potentially globally at some point. So I definitely got something out of it, but nothing, monetary that people may think.
Totally, I agree with Ella. That's exactly it. And I feel I learned so much from the people there, and I had such a better understanding of a different culture, their life, their experiences. I made great friends, and I was really quite brokenhearted when the Artisans program kind of fizzled away. But I think everyone there learned a lot from it, and I think they can use that knowledge as foundations for other things in their lives. But I feel it's near and dear to my heart, and all the people are there. And it wasn't monetary for sure.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that one. Yeah, Indian church and my time spent there in Belize in general just changed my perspective on my whole life, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
And like I did mention, I brought hundreds of students there, of which I did. And every evening we did what they call, well, we call them glows and glums, but we tried to, emphasize the glow part. And when those students would share what they were experiencing, I mean, I experienced it as well, but it's a completely different concept when you share something with somebody else, that community in that area, and then their perspective on it is just unbelievable. And the people that are there that I've met and become friends with are just, and I plan to continue to do more work there. So I mean, I hope to do some more projects in the future. This is my retirement plan. So it definitely impacted me, and yeah, I didn't monetarily benefit from it either. So thank you for the question.
I also think a lot of people may think. I just quickly wanted to add, most of the archaeologists or heritage researchers, they don't receive anything. It's not just us. Very rarely people running this project receive any compensation. And it may look like that. We're running this symposium, we have the World Monuments Fund nomination, but really all the money goes into making the project a reality, right? And so it may look professional and it may look very fancy, but most people, most creators, leaders don't actually benefit in a monetary way, not just in Indian church, but I think all over in the in the heritage industry and cultural industries overall.
Yeah, I'd like to tell a short little story
Yeah,
from
that's
maybe 10
right.
years ago. I was with someone in Orange Walk, a resident of Orange Walk, and archaeologists, we always say, oh yeah, we work at Lamanai. Well, that term work implies pay.
Mhm.
So everyone who I always say I work at Lamanai, they assume I'm getting money to work at Lamanai. And I said to this guy, I said, oh no, we don't ever get paid any money. We actually pay money to come to Belize to work at Lamanai. We're not making money. And that was a really big surprise to him that we paid the Institute of Archaeology for the privilege of working at Lamanai. So I have tried since then to take away that term work when I refer to working at Lamanai and say I do research at Lamanai. But it's so easy to just say I work there. But archaeologists don't get paid for this.
Thank you for that question.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
I think that is a common misconception um, throughout
Mhm.
Yeah.
throughout not, and I don't think just in archaeology, but most of the social sciences as well.
Mhm.
Um, our next question is for Mrs. Seda. So I believe we're connected now, and we can return to our question on what would be your advice to a student who is in a similar situation like yours when you were growing up?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear
Yes.
you now.
Great. So, first of all, let me thank you all for being here. I am grateful for the opportunity that you've given me to be part of this symposium. And like Karen, I get very emotional when dealing with the topic because it takes me back to where I come from, something that I can never forget. But one advice that I would give students that are going through, I would say, same trauma, would be for them to speak out. Speaking out is going to reach the ears of someone that might be able to help. In my case, I had, I think, Karen and Lara were a big influence. They play a big role in my development as a student, adolescent. Um, Speak out and stick to your priorities. Keep the focus no matter what. I know it is hard, but compared to years ago, now there are so many organizations in Belize that can be able to provide help in different manners. So I believe that the teachers do play a big part of the development of the child, not only because they are teachers and the children spend most of their time in the classroom, but as teachers, they are counselors, they are doctors, they are mom, they are dad, they are everyone, everything for that child at that moment. And I would say speak out, and stay firm. I know losing focus is the easiest thing to do, but somehow you have to be resilient and try your best. Try your best.
Thank you for those inspiring words. And there are so many good questions and so many good comments. However, we are at the end of our question and answer period. So I encourage you, Ms. Pierce, Ms. Howard, Ms. Useda, Ms. Békési, to please address some of the questions in our chat that that our engaging audience have shared with us, because we cannot possibly get to all your questions. So, audience, I'm so sorry, but we must pop the question and answer session. Thank you. Thank you, presenters. Thank you, audience, for being here with us today. And now I ask Ms. Ella Békési, our co-founder and co-director here at Heritage Education Network Belize, to say our final remarks for the afternoon.
Thank you. Well, I was tasked with closing the symposium. And, I thought about what I might say, what might be a good line to close a symposium with. And all I can think is how grateful I am to see that we had such an amazing and diverse lineup of presenters, and people attending and asking questions and engaging. When we came up with the idea of the KULCHA Symposium, our main goal was to make it accessible and open to everyone, and to have a diverse symposium where we can have someone from a high school or a student from a university speaking in the same space with a university professor, an indigenous community leader, a citizen historian, an entrepreneur. And so we wanted to make it as diverse as possible, because we felt that that is what represents culture. We felt that that is what represents Belize as a whole. And even though a lot of other symposiums are very niched and very strictly thematic, or very niche to who they allow to participate, we wanted to break that barrier. And we wanted the someone stumbling up on on our symposium, just scrolling on Facebook, be able to ask a question from a university professor. And I think that we were able to do that. I think we were able to do that last year when we did our first KULCHA symposium. And I think we definitely did that this year as well. And all of the presentations will be permanently on our YouTube page. You can make sure to look back. You can use them for your class, for research, and so that's really what we wanted to achieve. And I'm just so happy to see, after these 3 days, that I think we really did achieve that. And other than that, I need to give thanks to a lot of people. I want to give thanks to Ms. Stephanie Ortiz and Ms. Elimari Garcia Cosme from World Monuments Fund, and also Dr. Melissa Badillo from the Belizean Institute of Archaeology for their keynote, and also for their amazing support of the nomination of Lamanai Archaeological Reserve and its broader cultural landscape. I really think that without their support, it wouldn't be possible. And as you have seen from this session, it's really close to my heart. So a huge thank you to all of the 3 ladies. And I also want to thank our day 1 keynote speaker, Arlene Palacio Morgan, and our day 2 keynote speaker, Jaden Coleman, for taking the time and sharing their thoughts with us in a form of a keynote and introducing our daily sessions. I also want to thank our volunteers, Ali Villarreal, for helping us managing work in the back. Great job. Thank you so much. Lynn Mara, thank you. Lynn Mara Rosado, our amazing host, for hosting and helping us with whatever she's able to help with. You're the most wonderful host anyone can ask for, and I hope we get to keep you for the 3rd year of KULCHA Symposium. Also, a huge thank you for Alex Evans for composing our theme song that you are all jamming to in the breaks, and all the other amazing volunteers who helped us along the way, organizing and creating our graphics. We really wouldn't have been able to do this without you, because as you know, we are a volunteer-based organization. And so this symposium was created by volunteers for you. And lastly, I really want to thank my partners in crime, our co-directors. I want to thank Sylvia Batty. I want to thank April Martinez, and I want to thank Dr. Rebecca Fridel Juan, who have been doing an amazing job. And, we wouldn't be able to do this without each other. And Sylvia, you are here. I can see you. If you are here, I would like you to join, because I don't think I should. Hello. I don't think I should, close this on my own. It's not just me, it's the 4 of us and all our amazing volunteers. I think Becca is being a mama right now. So
yes, she is. We didn't want to say goodbye without the 4 of us, but I think that she would be happy for us to say goodbye on her behalf. Sylvia is hen being right now. She's hen bee on the road at the moment and in loud traffic. So I don't think she can speak.
But we can see her beautiful face.
We can see her beautiful face. And so, of course, we want to say thank you to all of you who had a hand in supporting Hen B. I think that people see the amount of work we put out, and that shows testimony to the amount of work that our volunteers do.
Yes.
But like Ella rightfully mentioned, we are a volunteer-led organization. the presenters who gave their time and their efforts to be here. You know, a lot of them were traveling and still made time for Q&A. And so we are so, so grateful for your support. I think that Henby is testimony to what you can do by just an idea and just the amount of love that you have for your initiatives and your field. And with all our viewers, thank you for your support. The more you continue to help Henby grow, the more we can put out stuff like KULCHA. And hopefully one day it can be live in person where we don't have to just do it virtually. So donate and we can make that happen. Humble, just a plug right in there. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered it.
Great.
We thank everyone who participated, who asked questions, all our volunteers who, you know, helped us along the way. We really couldn't do this without everyone. I think it really is a community organization.
It is.
And
We're a family, and I think that we hope that we get to have more of you volunteer and stay with us. So thank you all. This is not the last you've seen of Henby. We have more to come. Stay tuned for with our socials so you can see more about what's happening with WMF. And October, don't forget that the 10th is Indigenous Resistance Day. And so make sure you highlight that you're Indigenous groups. And as for November, we have our Garifuna Cultural Project coming up and probably a surprise for December project. So you don't want to miss what we have in store for you here at Henby. Okay, I done.
Okay, don't forget, you can follow us. You can see the little tab at the very bottom. You can follow us. We have Instagram, Facebook. We have an email newsletter. So if you visit our website, you can sign up. And we also have a YouTube channel where all of these presentations will be posted. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And I hope to see everyone soon. And also hope to see everyone at our 3rd annual KULCHA Symposium next year. Fingers crossed.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.